Yes, Wolfgang, go ahead, sir.
Howdy. Thank you so much for your talk.
Yes, sir.
You touched on the Big Bang and things of that nature. And you took it from a certainly a viewpoint that sounds like old Earth creationism. What's your stance on young Earth creationism? Either for or against it. What's your best arguments?
Absolutely.
Can science and faith coexist when it comes to the origins of the universe? In this video, we tackle one of the most debated topics in Christian apologetics, the age of the universe and the interpretation of Genesis. Join us as we explore questions like, is the earth young or old? What does the Bible really say about creation? And how should Christians navigate these discussions without compromising their faith? Get ready to dive into the fascinating interplay between Scripture, science, and the sovereignty of God.
Convinced the universe is at least 60 years old. All right, I'll add my mom in there. It's at least 84, okay? I don't really care how old the universe is. I think the evidence is much better it's old. And I don't think the Bible necessarily teaches a young universe for a number of reasons. First of all, let's just look at the first verse, which says this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, when did God create the heavens and the earth?
In the beginning.
In the beginning. Does it say when the beginning was?
No.
No. You say, what about the days? Well, the days begin in verse 3, where it says, and God said, right? Now, how much time elapsed from when God said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then, and God said? Was there time elapsing? We don't know. This is a summary statement in verse 1 about what's going to happen forward. We're not exactly sure. Also, if you notice, there is a certain poetic structure, although not a Hebrew poetic structure, but there is a poetic structure, it appears, to the first chapter of Genesis, when you have the first 3 days of creating, then the next 3 days of filling, and then the seventh day, God rests. And according to Hebrews 4, we're still in the seventh day. God is still resting. The seventh day is longer than 24 hours, certainly. So why were we saying that all the other days are 24 hours too? We can say that. Maybe that's the true interpretation, but we don't know for sure. In fact, I think, and this isn't my opinion, just my opinion, I've read it elsewhere by Hebrew scholars and others, that it appears that the Genesis 1 creation story is a polemic against the Egyptian creation story. What do I mean by that? First of all, who's Genesis written to? It's written by Moses to the people that just came out of slavery in Egypt. They just experienced the Exodus. When those people are walking through the desert, they're not walking around going, gee, I wonder how old this place is, right? They're not asking that question. What they're asking is Yahweh the true God or the Egyptian gods the true God? If you look at an Egyptian creation story, the Egyptian creation story talks about these gods that somehow already exist, who bring order to chaos, and they have to fight one another and fight evil forces to do so, to bring order to chaos. Moses says, first of all, these gods don't exist. Moses says that God just speaks and brings order to chaos. He just creates because he has the power to do so. He doesn't have to fight anyone. So Moses is basically saying, the Egyptian creation story, not the true story. This is the true story, but he's using the Egyptian story to let the Israelites know, no, this is the true God, this is the true creation story. But last thing I'll say on it, no matter how far back you go, you still need a creator. If the young earthers are right and the universe is thousands of years old, you need a creator. If scientists are right and other Christians are right, as even Augustine, who lived, 400 AD, he didn't think the first chapters of Genesis were trying to tell us how old the universe is, if it's old. If those people are right, you still need a creator, even if it's billions of years old. So it doesn't matter how far back you go.
Makes sense. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
The creation narrative in Genesis sparks numerous questions about the age of the universe, the interpretation of biblical texts, and the harmony between science and faith. This discussion provides an opportunity to explore these questions thoughtfully and biblically, deepening our understanding of God as creator. Young Earth creationism asserts that the universe, Earth, and all life were created in 6 literal 24-hour days, approximately 10,000 years ago, based on a straightforward reading of Genesis 1 and genealogies in the Bible. Old Earth creationism, on the other hand, accepts the scientific consensus that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old and the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Proponents often interpret the days of Genesis as long periods, the day-age theory, or as a literary framework describing the order of creation rather than its duration. The Hebrew word for day, yom, in Genesis 1 can mean a 24-hour day or a longer, indefinite period, depending on the context. For example, Genesis 2, 4 uses yom to refer to the entire creation process. Those favoring a literal interpretation argue for a plain reading of the text, supported by the phrase evening and morning. Others, pointing to the poetic structure of Genesis 1 and its similarities to ancient Near Eastern creation accounts, suggest the days are symbolic or metaphorical, emphasizing God's orderly creation rather than a specific timeline. Genesis was written to a people emerging from Egyptian slavery, surrounded by competing pagan creation narratives. The account directly counters myths of multiple gods battling chaos, presenting Yahweh as the sovereign creator who brings order simply by speaking. Understanding this polemic nature helps us see Genesis not primarily as a scientific manual, but as a theological declaration. God alone is creator, and creation is intentional and good. Genesis 1:31. Debates over the age of the universe should center on unity in essential doctrines rather than division over secondary matters. The Bible's primary message in Genesis is not the timeline of creation, but its authorship. Both young Earth and old Earth creationists affirm that God created everything ex nihilo, out of nothing, and that creation reflects His glory, Psalm 19:1. Christians should engage these discussions with humility, recognizing the limits of human knowledge and focusing on the shared truth that God is the sovereign creator. Many Christians believe science and Scripture can complement each other. Scientific discoveries about the universe's age and complexity reveal the handiwork of an intelligent designer. For example, the Big Bang theory aligns with the biblical assertion that the universe had a beginning, Genesis 1:1. Issues arise when either Scripture or science is misinterpreted. Christians must distinguish between interpreting Scripture faithfully and imposing rigid interpretations that may not reflect the text's intent. Augustine, writing in the 4th century, argued that the days of Genesis 1 might symbolize God's creative acts rather than literal days. He emphasized the mystery of creation and cautioned against tying biblical interpretation to speculative timelines. Augustine's perspective reminds Christians to approach Genesis with reverence for its theological depth, recognizing its primary aim is to reveal God's nature and purpose, not to serve as a scientific treatise. Genesis 1 reveals God's unmatched power and wisdom. By speaking, He brings order from chaos, life from nothingness, and beauty from simplicity. This understanding fosters awe and trust in God's sovereignty. Whether creation occurred in 6 days or over billions of years, the essential truth remains. All life depends on God, and His creation reflects His glory. Moreover, the creation account points to Christ, through whom and for whom all things were made. Colossians 1:16. The creation narrative invites believers to marvel at God's power and wisdom while embracing the mystery of His works. Questions about the age of the universe and the interpretation of Genesis should not divide Christians but encourage dialogue, study, and worship. As we explore the intersection of Scripture and science, we affirm that the heavens declare the glory of God, Psalm 19:1, and we rest in the assurance that He is the creator and sustainer of all.